Hello again, everyone. We want to pick up where we left off, and I believe this is where we were, so we're going to start right here. We're talking about adding multicultural pieces into the curriculum and how to recognize all cultures in your classroom um, in very diplomatic and very honorable ways. Students develop knowledge by interacting mentally and to some extent physically with people and objects around them. The interaction requires active involvement. Knowledge that is poured into a passive mind is quickly forgotten. All that said, if you are studying a different culture, you need to find artifacts. Sometimes call that relia. You bring it in. At the very least, you have pictures. Perhaps you can take a virtual tour of a museum. If you're studying Egypt, maybe you can take a virtual tour of some of the museums in Egypt that have unearthed some of the artifacts over there to help your kids to see what it is, to look at it, to actually get an eyeball on it instead of just telling them what it looks like or what it is. As we continue this, we look at benefits of multicultural curriculum that lead teachers to share what they're doing and work together to plan learning experiences. You stay in this area, you need to keep your eye on the St. Louis Science Center because they have all kinds of things over there. I don't know how many of you have been able to take advantage of some of their summer programs. Perhaps you have, perhaps you haven't. I don't know what they're going to be doing this summer. Couple of years ago they had the King Tut exhibit. I took one of my great nieces and great nephews over there, and we spent and I know my great nephew was not jumping up and down it about it, and I think my great niece was a little, yeah, they were about 9 at the time, and I think they were kind of I couldn't hardly get them out of there. I couldn't drag them away. They were so intrigued by all of this stuff. Teachers who come to school, close the doors of their classrooms, and teach in isolation are becoming a thing of the past. You have to interact, you have to be involved, you have to work with other people. I know one of the teachers, the third grade teacher at the school here in town where I'm working with the teachers, they have virtual pen pals. And yes, they type letters, but they also talk to them via Skype or FaceTime. They actually see these people and they interact with them. There's so many cool things going on right now. I know with teachers around here and all kinds of places in with what we have right now in touching base with their kids because we all, I am no exception, neither are you, with the students that you were with in the classroom for such a very short time. But these teachers are they're struggling right now, and I understand that, not being able to see their kids for the rest of the year. They can FaceTime with them, they can whatever with them, they can Zoom meetings with them, but it's just not the same when you're with those kids in that classroom day in and day out, every day from 8 to 3 or whatever the time frame is, 5 days a week for 36 weeks out of the year, and all of a sudden you just don't go back to school again thinking you will, and now you're not. You don't have time. There's no closure there. The kids are missing the teachers are missing the kids. It's kind of it's a mess. I understand it. It's a necessity, but teachers are not in isolation anymore. They have to work together. They have to use those curriculum maps. I can't tell you that enough. Those curriculum guides, those curriculum maps, we have to work together to plan experiences and to look for things. When I took field trips when I was teaching at the elementary level, with my second graders, our place to go in the spring, we would go to Grant's Farm, and they had a list of things to find at Grant's Farm. We talked about Grant's Farm. We talked before we went on our field trip, and they had to. It was kind of like a scavenger hunt for them. They had to look and find this and find that, which meant I had to go to Grant's Farm before we went on our field trip and check out all the things that were there to give them some ideas. When confronted with a problem, individuals do not say, now, which part of this science, which is science and which is language arts. You address problems with a multidisciplinary approach and use whatever resources and content they need to use to resolve them, which means you have to teach every subject area at the elementary level, and you have to coordinate at the high school level, the middle school level, with other teachers to give these kids sorry, to give these kids the pieces that they need to solve the problems, to use their knowledge to the full extent to figure this out or that out, which means here we go again. You have to activate the background knowledge and teach the vocabulary so they have something from which to draw to get that file folder open, so they understand what you're asking them to do in the context in which you're asking it. When we're looking at goals and outcome statements, these are huge in the schools, the goals and the outcome statements. Time is the scarcest resource in a school. Time management is very, very hard. I'll just tell you, it's terribly difficult. And you have a little more leeway when you're in your own classroom, because if you don't get something done today, you can do it tomorrow. But if you have to run into tomorrow, then you're going to have to decide what can you slide over to use these minutes for this and those minutes for that. Reflective teachers who organize time wisely are more successful in delivering the curriculum they have planned than teachers who fail to make time consideration. You always overplan, always, always, always overplan, because you might think this is going to take 10 minutes and it takes 2 days, and something that you think is going to take 2 days takes a half an hour. You're never sure. You always overplan and then you adjust. Lesson plans are living, breathing documents. They have to be. I don't know if you have put those two pieces together yet, but lesson plans are always living, breathing documents. You breathe life into them when you write them. Okay, they're breathing documents there. But if you just teach exactly what's on that page and never sidestep if needs be, the lesson plan dies. They have to be living, breathing documents. Teachers who simply start each subject on page 1 of every textbook and hope to finish the text by June are frequently surprised by the lack of time. Sometimes you have to put 2 or 3 lessons together, intertwine them, or teach something across 2 or 3 days that takes in subject in pieces from other subjects. If you're at the elementary level, you're going cross curricular. That's what you call that. If you're teaching this reading story, you're teaching this lesson in reading and language arts, and if you're teaching a lesson, let's say on baseball, to third graders, there's a reading lesson on baseball. And then for your math lesson, yes, you're adding 3-digit numbers. So how about if we add together, I don't know, RBIs? What's the total number RBIs? Yes, I realize they're, whatever. What's the total? Pull it across. Then in social studies, maybe you're talking about, in third grade, you might be talking about what happens in communities. Well, then talk about the Corey League teams or the whatever kind of teams that are in the communities. You have to go across the curriculum. In some cases, they finish a text early in the year, but more often the school year ends without the students ever getting to the subjects at the back of the textbook. This happens in particular in history and social science, whether it's at the elementary level or at the high school level. We start at page 1. We talk about the explorers all over and over and over and over and over, and we never get past, perhaps we might get as far as World War II, and that's about it, if that. There's history happening every day, and we are denying our kids a lot of it because we just don't talk about it. I will tell you right now, back on the history thing before we do this, you're living through history right now. The history that you're living through right now, your students are only going to read about in the history books. You are living, breathing it right now. You need to be journaling. You need to be saving some of these. If you get a physical newspaper, if you get a physical periodical, You need to be saving some of these things, archiving some of these things, and pull them out later. I have all kinds of things like that at my house. I have it now. I don't use it. It's in it's in our old freezer where I have a lot of things stored. But I have newspapers that go back to the Challenger explosion. I have the other, and I can't think of it right now. The other shuttle that exploded. All these things that happened. I have all of that. The newspapers that came out from there. You need to start archiving things right now because you are living through a moment in history that I pray to God never happens again. So, will you be satisfied if that happens in your classroom? You get to the end of a book. I taught with a guy like that. He taught 4th grade. They started the very first day. You know, when you used to go for that first half hour or hour and then you went home that first day, his kids always left with homework. His goal was to get through to the end of the book by the end of the year. He didn't care if they got the information. He just plowed through. If you're satisfied if that happens in the classroom, if you're not, then you can prevent it by pre-planning the time you're going to give to each element or subtopic of each subject area you're going to teach. Can you stick to that in concrete? No, but you need to have a plan. You can't just go willy-nilly. Let me tell you, you try to fly by the seat of your pants, and sometimes you're going to be fine. Most of the time, you're not. You're not required to plan every outcome and objective for every subject before the year begins, but you've got to have some idea of where you're going. You need to do some of that backward mapping. Start at the end where you know you have to have them. How are you going to get them there? Then divide. If you're like me, I can't think that big. So this is where they have to be. So then divide it into 4. You have 4 quarters. Divide it into fourths. I can be here, I can be here, I can be here. Okay, now back it up. How are you going to get them there? You have to come up with a plan for yourself that works for you, that may not work for somebody else, but whatever works for you. You need to give the entire curriculum an overview and determine the number of days or weeks you will allot to each element. That's easier said than done. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But to go in with no battle plan is just setting yourself up and your students for failure. You look at the standards for your grade level and compare them to the textbook and use that curriculum map. It's there for a reason. That is one of the most important documents in the school district. That curriculum map or curriculum guide, whatever they call it, that also must be a living, breathing document. There is no such thing at the school where I'm working. There will be now, because as soon as we work on this reading curriculum, we are going to have the reading curriculum mapped by the end of next year. This next year, we're going to be looking at the science curriculum to replace science textbooks and some of those kinds of things. And that curriculum will be mapped at the same time. Most books are divided into units, each covering a single topic or collection of related topics within the academic subject. You need to look at your textbook and you need to decide, how are you going to split this up? How are you going to do this? And is this textbook meeting the standards that I need to meet? Is it teaching my kids what they have to know to go on? If it's not, you're going to have to supplement. That's the hard reality. You are going to have to supplement because you need to get your students from point A to point B and do it in a way that they gain a lot of information to move on. Curriculum units are excellent planning devices because they show students how facts, skills, concepts, and applications of ideas are related. You have to relate these things. That's why, especially at the elementary level, it's best to teach cross-curricular. You don't teach social studies in isolation, and math in isolation, and reading in isolation, and language arts in isolation. You intertwine them. You weave them together in some way that you can work with them and that the kids are going to understand. Once again, I'm up against the gun here, so I will talk to you in a little while. Be safe, wash your hands, use a hand sanitizer.